Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of What a Hell of a Way to Dad. It's Francis, and back with me once again, I have military.com reporter Steve Beynon back to talk about some of his stories, talk about some of the things that are happening in the military. Steve, how are you doing today?
Excellent. Thank you for having me as always. How are you doing today?
I'm doing okay. I continue to not be in the Army, so a lot of these things continue to not affect me, which is pretty nice. But
excellent.
You know, I spent 20 years in, so I always have my affinity for diving back in and you know, seeing. I don't want to go back, but you know, I like to see what's going on. I like to know that there's progress going on. I like to see what the kids are up to, just so that I can, in my old age, be like, thank God I'm not 20 years old anymore. Really keeps you on the even flow of middle-agedom to look at 20-year-olds and go like, ooh, fuck that. No, I don't want that.
Yeah, it's like why you check your Facebook like once a month and just like who your friends in high school, what they're up to.
Yeah,
something like that.
Ask them where they all were on January 6th. So Steve, we haven't had you on for a while. There's been a lot of news that have been happening. We will talk kind of more recent stuff, but there's a few things that you and I have talked about before, one of them being recruiting goals. And that recruiting goals, maybe last year, 2 years ago, very difficult to hit those goals. And I think that some of that in those discussions, it was kind of a mixture between the pool of people who can join the military and want to join the military is often not there scholastically or not there weight-wise. Mm-hmm. So there's that problem. There's also, when we have a good economy, nobody wants to join the Army because why would you? Mm-hmm. But now you have this article that says the Army has hit 30,000 recruits, half of the goal for the year. And so is this fiscal year that we're talking? Because this came out in early January.
Yeah. That is the fiscal year which begins October 1st for the federal government. And the Army, the military has kind of like two big recruiting surges. It's always towards the end of the year, so the end of the school year before the holidays start, and then they usually get another huge bump late spring. So when the school year traditionally ends,
so you got to get them on their way out. It's like, hey, you're graduating high school, still haven't figured out what you want to do. Have you thought about getting screamed at by another adult?
No, that's a perfect way to get them. And so there's a couple of things going on with them hitting their halfway through their goal so early. One is they have this thing called the delayed entry pool. So the number's a little inflated. So last year that pool was 11,000. And so if let me hold your hand through some numbers real quick because it gets silly fast like everything. So the Army recruited 55,000 people last year. Technically they brought in 66,000, right? Let's subtract 11,000 from that, right? Those people go into the delayed pool. Those are people, sometimes they still got to finish their senior year or they're delayed for any number of reasons. Yeah, or any number of reasons.
I was a delayed entry, yeah.
So it's a little fun with numbers, but that 11,000 will count towards the following year. So the year we're in now. So they already had a huge leg up, but that delayed pool, now here's what's interesting, is it was about twice as big as it is other years. Every year on average is between about 4,000 and 6,000, right? And the reason it was so large last year is because the Army actually ran out of basic training space to send people.
Oh, okay.
And this is where we're getting into a story it'll definitely be published by the time they're adding 10 basic training companies. This will allow the Army to train 10,000 extra new soldiers a year. You mentioned that a big problem is people can't really meet the academic and weight standards. There's a lot of complicated public policy reasons for that. In the Army, we've talked about before, they stood the Future Soldier Prep Course. There's two tracks. There's the tutoring part to get you up to speed on your ASVAB, and then there's the, for lack of a better phrase, the fat camp part. They teach you how to work out and eat correctly, and that took up basic training space, right? The areas they did that were basic training units, and the Army hit this weird, good problem to have. We're like, okay, we're actually getting so many more people now because of the prep courses. It's made up their entire recruiting deficit. We have nowhere to send them for basic training because the prep courses was taking up that space. So that's a problem the Army is going to have on paper is going to have fixed by April with these 10 new basic training companies.
Are these basic training companies going to be at bases that already exist? Like how is the military, I guess, creating the space?
Yeah, so it's going to be in Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. This is opening up new real estate in those bases.
Okay, so I guess they have to build the spaces though first, right? Like, or are these area is already built.
Yeah, these areas are already built. There's different spots on the installations that are just being redesignated basic training locations, and we're adding additional cycles to the year. So they're just kind of they're doing a lot of, they're just moving pieces around the board, just reallocating what spaces are being used for. But there's not a lot of new construction because it takes the Army 6 years to build a fruit stand.
Right. Well, my wife used to do flooring estimation. She worked for a flooring estimating job, and she bid some things down in Leonard Wood years ago. And she always said, like, the military, it's a pain in the ass. But like, one, you're going to get paid, so it's not too bad. But also, they build, like, the federal government builds this shit to last. So all of you complaining about how old your barracks are, that's on purpose, where we don't have to upgrade it all the time. The high uses like ceramic tiling and everything, which keeps it like, look, you can scrub these with your toothbrushes for decades. We have plenty of soldiers that are going to come through that we're going to make do that anyway. So it'll keep it nice and clean. But yeah, those projects take time. But I know that Leonard Wood has been expanding over the last 10 years. Like, every time I've been down there, whether it be for training or just, I like Leonard Wood's nearby. They got some really cool museums there. I need to get back there, but they've always been constructing. It's always been more BCT areas. So I guess they've been preparing for this, which seems, I don't know. I'm curious to see how it's going to end up working.
Right. And kind of going a little bit back to people not quite meeting the Army standard to join. It's interesting that it's very attributed to men. I think we've talked about male recruitment is down more than a quarter over the past decade, but female recruitment has been about the same every year. We talk about this, the recruiting crisis. It gets the headlines. It's Congress is all upset about it. This is what people hear about, but it's not impacting women at all. The Army gets about 10,000 women every year, and them hitting this goal is attributed largely to women continuing to enlist. That's its own set of weird, very complicated stuff. But, public test scores have been going down for a very long time, and that issue was inflamed during the pandemic. But those issues actually are more likely to impact boys. Boys are falling further and further behind girls. Boys are also much more likely to have criminal convictions, which hurts the recruiting process. And they're also much more likely to be overweight than girls. So on average, the male applicant, the pool of males in America is becoming less and less of a viable pool compared to women, which is an interesting issue.
Yeah, and you said 10,000. That counts for about 1/6. I guess the Army shooting for 60,000 a year. Now, does that include retention too, or is that its own statistic?
No, retention is its own thing, and retention they always hit their retention goal pretty early. They usually hit it late spring, early summer, and a lot of that comes from the Army has this it's hard to get people in, but once they're in, they tend to want to stay in, which is you think about you think about the benefits,
it's
you set things up with your family, it's a steady job, and then as you and your listeners know, there's almost like an event horizon once you get to like 8 to 10 years, and you're like, well, I'm halfway towards retirement. So it's a very, once they get you that, if they get that second contract, you're 4 years is the time to leave, right?
Yeah.
If you get that second one, then it's just like, it makes so much economic sense to stay in.
And I've heard they've changed it though. Like, I was one of the last people to actually sign contracts past 10 years. And now like you hit 10 years, you're on an indefinite contract, right?
It depends. I mean, everyone has a different setup. Some people can set up a situation where they do year to year, or set up contracts years in ahead of time, or stuff like that. It's very situational dependent and MOS dependent.
Right. Okay. So we've got this great recruiting pool that we're kind of building. Are they building it with this programming that they're doing? I hate calling it fat camp. I don't want to call it that. The recruit training.
The Future
areas.
Soldier Preparatory Course Fitness Track is the.
There we go.
That is the official terminology. There's the fitness and the academic track.
Okay. So we've got this fitness and academic track that we're putting where, somebody can get recruited. And is it kind of is this part of the delayed entry as well? Like, we want you want to be here too, but we've got to shed a few pounds, or we've got to get you up a few IQ points before we can really let you loose in the military.
Yeah. This is where things always get goofy fast. You can be delayed entry and then go Future Soldier Prep, or not. You could enlist and then immediately go to the Future Soldier Prep course the following week. it's all a matter of availability and schedule and classes and stuff like that. We've all heard stories. You go to MEPS and then someone's in basic training the next week, or you go to MEPS and you're in basic training in 15 months just for a weird whatever set of circumstances someone might be in.
So recruiting, they're good. How's everybody else doing? The Marines, the Navy, Air Force, they all hitting their goals too?
Yeah. So, I mean, the Marines never really had too much of an issue. Their recruiting goal is, a little under is about 30,000 every year. It's not, they like to pound their chest and, no one markets better than Marines, right?
Yeah. No, it's ever since that dude was fighting a lava monster with a sword, it's like everybody understood that the Marines are kind of a little bit cooler.
Right. Yeah. So, but they also just don't have to recruit as many people. So they just haven't had as much of a problem. Same goes for Space Force. Space Force is still a branch of about 5,000 people. They don't have a recruiting issue. And a lot of their recruiting is actually still pulling people from the Air Force to do branch transfers. And then you got, the Navy is in a very similar boat to the Army because it's a similar size. And they actually also started a future preparatory course, a future sailor preparatory course, which is going well. And then the Air Force is doing fine.
I feel like the Air Force is never going to have a problem. I was talking to a dental technician who wanted to join the Air Force. It was like, yeah, if you're gonna, that's the direction to go.
Yeah, so I mean that's why the Army is always at the center of this. I don't think it's anything in particular to the branch or anything unique. I think it's just more just the size of it. Even if you have a great, let's just say, the Army is a phenomenal organization firing on all cylinders. It's the best career choice ever someone can make. They still got to bring in 60,000 people a year, and that is a big move for any organization, regardless of quality.
Yeah, it's a big ask. Even when you're, and let's be honest, not exactly picking from the tops of the classes for the military.
Right, and especially with you got to hit academic standards, which people are struggling with. You got to hit the weight standards, and frankly, it's not a talking point. There are entry level jobs that do sound kind of sexy. I don't live near a Buc-ee's, but I see what they pay if you're willing to clean some bathrooms. And I'm like, listen, that's about what you would make as a E3, and I have a very reliable work schedule, and they have pathways to management. So it is interesting, and you see stories and some studies coming out on college maybe being a little less relevant in the job market now, and and that's the Army's biggest recruiting tool in terms of a pitch to service. So maybe that's becoming a little less sexy, and the pay's not as sexy, and something that I've talked to some people about. There's no war going on. So,
yeah, there's not a big one, at least,
which is good, right? That's good. Yeah. We do not want war, but with that comes with military is just not in the zeitgeist. It's not in the news. There's no Black Hawk Down in movie theaters. So the other thing you kind of get into is just not really in the mind. 19-year-olds are just not probably thinking about the military. It's just not in their life, really.
We haven't had a good blockbuster war movie to get the kids into the recruiting stations in a long time. I mean, Dunkirk, but that's British.
Yeah, yeah. So they're
1917, which World War One.
Right.
I mean, I think the problem is because there's nothing fun and sexy about our wars that you can really put into a glorified movie. Every time they do, everybody just makes fun of it.
Right. So you have a multifaceted issue. You have it's just not in the zeitgeist, so it's not relevant. You got only about roughly a fourth of young people who are even qualified for service. So that's your pool you got to deal with. You got a competitive job market. So that's an extraordinary hurdle for the Army to overcome, frankly.
Yeah, you can always see the military had a big, the surge years. Mm-hmm. Surprisingly coincided with the economy shitting the bed, so it was real easy to fill those ranks back then. If as long as your trigger finger worked and one of your eyes could see, all right, yeah, we'll bring you in. We'll send you off to Iraq. It's fine.
Yeah, they could be a little bit more. They could be a little bit more picky. And then we got something they are doing that's really interesting is you can pick the duty station that you're assigned to, with caveats, right? What MOS are you picking? Is there availability there? Needs of the Army kind of things, and a lot of people are Fort Cavazos is the top pick, which tells me that, I think the previous Army secretary, blame might not be the best word, but pointed to, hey, the Army gets a lot of negative media attention, so that's probably not helping us, which that shows I don't think that's true at all.
I feel like most of the negative media attention that the military gets is their handling of something, less what is actually going on. I'm less concerned about, the Fort Liberty murder swamp as I am the military just covering it up and letting it happen.
Yeah.
Things like that. The sexual assault, sexual assault was a huge problem. I mean, it's a big problem in the military regardless, but it was forefront in the media a couple of years ago. And a lot of the problems, a lot of the reporting that was happening around it was the military sucks at handling this and PAO not doing their job. But, PAO can only tell you what the Army's doing. And if the Army's going to do something that's stupid and shitty, that's what we got to tell you. So it's very much shooting yourself in your own foot.
Yeah. With that, like, as much as I think everybody should read military.com every single day and everything we put out, I just don't. I think maybe people are overestimating a 17-year-old's media savvy. I don't think I don't think a lot of potential applicants like really research or put a lot of thought into joining to the point where they're reading like the last like couple of stories in the New York Times or Military Times or I put out. I just don't think they're really doing that.
No.
That's way like, I mean, for anyone listening, when you all joined the military, did you really go through like news reports about the service?
Right.
And it's
Let me read about the Army before I joined.
Right.
My brother and my dad said, yeah, we joined the Army. It sucked.
Right.
We'll have fun.
Yeah.
Go for
So
it.
I don't think the media is influential at all when it comes to teens and young adults joining. I still think it's just I don't have a job. I need something to do. I want to jump out of airplanes with machine guns, or I want to impress my girlfriend, or I don't have another thing to do in life.
All the classic reasons for joining the military. I want to say I was experiencing all of those. I never jumped out of the airplane, but I did enjoy the machine guns.
Yeah, right. So yeah, this all also comes with, the other services are basically in the same boat, but the Army in particular, it hasn't changed how it recruits people. It's still a sledgehammer. They haven't changed any marketing. I mean, anyone listening, you go to the Army's YouTube page and watch the last couple of recruiting videos or whatever. It's the same stuff they made 10 years ago. And they can't go on TikTok, so they can't even talk to a huge swath of people.
Yeah, but there's still all those TikTok influencers that are military. I imagine those kind of help out too. Like I know there's the psyop babe or whatever, and there's a couple of other funny ones out there. But I know the military can't actually do anything there. I think the military's biggest thing that helps them is that 18-year-old males are real fucking stupid. Like if you're an 18-year-old male, I'm sorry to tell you this. But we all were at 18, and it's not your fault. It's just the fact that you're 18 and you think you know everything and you don't. And then you join the military and maybe you'll have a good time. But certainly my 17-year-old ass signing on the dotted line was not doing my research and doing my due diligence. I wasn't reading about the things that I read about now about, how the military has done horrible things across the globe. I wasn't reading those books at 17. I was reading Star Wars books. So unfortunately, a lot of that missed out on me. Yeah.
It's like when I did that story on, General Hamilton, which, long story short, he subverted the promotion process in favor of a unqualified female officer subordinate. And the reason I note her gender is just read between the lines there. And I just saw like a lot of comments that be like, oh, this is why people won't join. I was like, there is no 17-year-old in America reading about a 4-star general subverting the promotion. They don't even know what I'm talking about.
No, they don't give a shit. And they'll join the Army and they still won't give a shit. All right, let's change gears. Let's keep talking about our younger soldiers. We have one called Trading Dip for Zyn. Nearly 1/4 of soldiers at Fort Liberty are using nicotine pouches. So you're in the military. Do you use nicotine at all?
I don't. I never have, shockingly. Although I'll always say when I went to Afghanistan, I always had some with me because you can always trade it for something.
Yeah. Cigarettes work great in jail and on deployment. I was a smoker during both of my deployments, and nicotine use has always been really big. And I always thought that I hope that the many decades of anti-smoking, media and things that we've had over, like I said, over many decades, no longer getting to see Joe Cool the camel on the back of our, back of Boy's Life or whatever it was that we were reading back then. I always figured like nicotine itself would kind of go out of fashion, but it just seems like we're just finding new ways, because it's not necessarily the cigarettes or the dip. It's the nicotine that we want. And if nicotine patches themselves were cheaper, I'm sure that people will be slapping that shit onto them all the time. So what's this with Zyn? I know Zyn is for those of you who are not users, Zyn is not like snus where it's tobacco in a pouch. It's just like nicotine salts. So it's missing all the things that give you the cancer except for the nicotine, right?
Yeah.
That seems correct. And so And as you mentioned here, dip and tobacco use has been tradition throughout the military, but now all the kids are doing Zyn. What's going on with this? Why is nicotine still so big?
I mean, nicotine has been a cornerstone of the military going back to the colonial era, and it's not going away anytime soon. It just goes back to soldier board, soldier need to do something, and it gives them something to do, something to think about. And it's easy to carry. You could have it on the range, you could have it on mission, you could have it in the office. And it's just an easy vice to massage regardless of your duty status. Like, I like wine, but like I can't drink wine on the range.
But you shouldn't drink wine on the range.
You shouldn't drink wine on the range. There's your safety brief. But you can have Zyn anywhere you want, and it's relatively cheap. And when it comes to Zyn, maybe the junior soldiers are maybe smoking a little less, as that's become increasingly taboo and not okay. And we're just old men wondering what this Zyn thing is.
Right. Back in my day, it was cigarettes and coffee, and now it's Zyn and White Monster.
Yeah, maybe it's Zyn and Bangs. Maybe I don't even know.
Is it Bangs? We always make the joke of White Monster, but even that might be might be passe. I don't even know if the kids know what Red Bull is these days.
Oh no, they don't drink Red Bull. They're doing Zyn and trading crypto.
Kick flipping from Nintendo to Nintendo.
Is that like the private doesn't buy the Mustang at 45% APR? It's they blow their whole enlistment bonus on a crypto investment.
Oh God, that's
got to be a thing, right?
I hope it is. Yeah, it certainly is going to start being a thing as we get more crypto. Oh God, crypto kids in the military. I'm glad I'm not in the Army anymore for many reasons, but also because I don't have to I occasionally have to interact with teenagers because my daughter does dance and there are teenagers around, but usually it's a, hey, how are you doing? I'm dropping my kid off. All right, see you later kind of thing. I don't have to learn anything about what's going on here. I don't have to learn about their weird habits and their Zyn addictions and if they're drinking Monster. It's nice. I don't have to deal with them in the Army. I don't have to deal with them in my real life either. It's comforting.
Yeah, no, for sure. And so that's the story. That's the study. That's the RAND study I'm waiting on. I want to know Joe blowing enlistment bonuses on crypto. That's what I'm waiting on. And then by the time we get that, it's crypto and like an OnlyFans girl they're subscribed to.
I've seen some stories about dudes who are dropping like $1,000 a month on OnlyFans, which is a lot of masturbation, guys. This is really, really a little too much.
Yeah, well, hey, at least they're not crashing it. You can't crash an OnlyFans subscription.
That's true, and you can always cancel it, and you're not stuck with it for the next 5 years. Yeah. I also like that. It seems like Zyn doesn't require you to have a gross dip bottle to spit in constantly, which was one I dipped a bit, but cigarettes were always I always prefer to smoke, and the carrying around of a stinky dip bottle was the thing that always made me this can't be a habit of mine, because
which no one does that in the real world. No one does that anywhere else. That's not a thing you will see. And maybe I don't know. Maybe I was sheltered. I don't know. I never saw dipping happen until I joined the Army, and I just saw someone just standing and spitting in a bottle. I was like, something wrong with them? What's going on with this?
Right.
So it's like a medical thing.
The military has I will say this, very strict rules about the nicotine users, about how you will not make a mess with it. Because I remember when I would be on mission in Afghanistan, I wouldn't even we'd be outside, we'd smoking, but we're outside the wire, and I wouldn't flick my cigarette butt on the ground, even though there's trash everywhere. But I'm trying not to be the gross American, so I would rip the cherry out and stuff it in my back pocket, and then end of the day I'd be emptying 20 cigarette butts out of my back pocket. So I understand. In the military, it seems like you get the dip bottle because nobody wants you to be Sergeant Major's going to come out of somewhere and start screaming at you.
Yeah,
and with his dip breath and his bottle.
Yeah, I'm okay. The dip bottle's dead.
Yeah, it's gross, guys. Don't if you are dipping, we have something better. It's just called do this regular nicotine salts, which always sound like, I don't know. Maybe the kids didn't go through a bath salts stage like all the rest of us had to live through, where somebody do bath salts and then you bite your friend's face off or something. So let's see what we got next. All right, so we're recording this on the last day of January, so we have some news, and we want to make sure that you guys know when you're you're listening to this, all the things that have happened, you're like, why aren't you talking about those things? Is because this is still January. So whatever fuckery is going to happen in
The news is moving
February.
so fast. You could publish this in 5 minutes. It'll probably already be outdated.
Exactly. So, I don't want to talk about Pete Hegseth because fuck that guy. But the Army choice for secretary, it seems to be I don't know who Daniel Driscoll is, first off. So tell me who Daniel Driscoll is. What MTV Road Rules show was he on?
So no one knows who Dan Driscoll is, including me, who watched him talk to the Senate for 2 hours. So Dan Driscoll, man, where do you start with Dan Driscoll? So he served in the 10th Mountain Division for a little under 4 years. He was a cavalry officer, did an Iraq deployment with them, left a little under 4 years in, immediately went to Yale Law School, and that's where he met J.D. Vance, who was a classmate of his at the time, and Senator Blumenthal's son. So he was immediately very well connected, graduated Yale, went on to venture capital. He helped run a hospital staffing agency, some political advising. He advised J.D. Vance through a lot of his political career and the Trump-Vance transition team and the Republican National Committee. So that's kind of his background. It's money and advising his friend J.D. Vance.
Once again, the Ivies coming out of nowhere and screwing it up for everybody.
Right. And a little under 4 years of military service.
Yeah.
So he gets selected and it kind of follows the trend of Trump picks. Very unorthodox choices with, like a lot of his other appointments, maybe not the most traditional resume for the role. It's really hard for me to understand, or even some lawmakers to understand, like where the qualifications are. The Army is a very complicated machine. And even if he was, maybe he was the greatest platoon leader in the world, the Army just has all this, there's acquisitions, there's quality of life issues. There's also just so much jargon and acronyms. You have to wonder, how long is it going to take him to even understand what he's getting briefed in certain scenarios? And he came to his briefing very inoffensive. He's generally well-spoken. He would also be very young for the role, 38. And just didn't have the Senate didn't really ask him a lot of very hard questions, frankly. So we didn't really get a good handle on what his priorities would be and where his mindset is. But he would come to the role very different from previous picks like Mark Esper or Christine Wormuth. A lot of people in this role, they have very thick resumes of being policy wonks or their own long-term military service. But Driscoll's not coming to the role with any sort of traditional qualifications.
Yeah, I see that Senator Duckworth was saying you don't know how big an Army division is or where the Army is operating in Africa, which, to be fair, I don't know either, but I'm also not being asked to be Secretary of the Army.
Right, and I think...
Nobody wants me in that place.
Yeah, you could play... it sounds like Senator Duckworth was doing NCO boarding him, which I think it's easy to trip someone up asking them basic questions.
Yeah, asking them Army trivia questions how fast should you be able to put on your protective mask? Fuck off.
Faster than the gas gets in my lungs.
Yeah, hopefully fast enough.
Yeah, but no, he did. And when it the Africa question is no, you might not know that, your listeners might not know that, but you should, if you want to run an organization, it was surprising that he doesn't know the very basic big missions. So Djibouti is one of the biggest Army missions right now. We have thousands of soldiers there. It's been a very long mission, and we have people in Somalia. I think what she was getting at with that is no, you don't need to know that, some obscure classified special operations mission in Niger or something. But you should.
I do know about Djibouti. Yeah.
Right. So
I at least know about Djibouti.
But it was a little eyebrow raising that he didn't seem to know at least the big muscle movements the Army has right now. But there are two things he pointed out, which was interesting. He did go into, it's actually what didn't happen. He did not get into culture war issues. And I talked to some folks in the Pentagon about it. That's what stood out to them too. It was teed up for him to talk about this issue. So they asked him about promotions, which would, if you asked Pete Hegseth that during his hearing, he probably would have went down the rabbit hole of DEI this, DEI that. And Driscoll said the Army has a merit-based system. He actually went in, except he said he believes the Army has a bias towards time and service when it comes to promotions, which, a lot of people know that is the promotion system is heavily weighted to how long have you been here versus maybe your qualifications. Some promotions, especially on the enlistment side, are automatic, which is you've been here for a certain amount of time, you haven't broken any laws, you're good to go. And you can go back to his campaign. He ran against Madison Cawthorn, if you guys remember the wheelchair-bound firebrand. Lost in that primary, came in 6th. You go back and review his campaign ads and some of the media appearances he did. He's not a fire breather. He's not, when you think of a MAGA era Republican, he does not fit that mold, or at least he hasn't shown us publicly yet. And he also pointed to things that some of the recruiting issue can be alleviated with looking at waivers at NEPs. He brought up issues with, if you broke your arm when you were 14, like why is that getting flagged now? So that is the one thing slightly below the surface level he seemed to understand as an issue. So we'll have to wait and see with him.
Yeah, I don't trust anybody that Trump's gonna put in place. Like my immediate reaction is just that this is just a blank face yes man who's gonna go along with whatever. But I mean, it's true. In our perfect army world, it is merit based. I would also say maybe we shouldn't promote people because of how fast they can run too. Mm-hmm. But I had to deal with things on the enlisted side. I imagine he was an officer, so a little bit different there. Yeah,
if we remember Hexteth's hearing, he falsely said a lot of things about the Army has quotas for promotions and positions, which just is not true. Mm-hmm. Race and gender is not taken into account in promotions or any sort of personnel selection process. I think the closest you can get to that is there's loose guidance where, hey, if there's a female junior enlisted soldier, it'd be nice to get a female NCO in there. So you might take a female NCO from another unit and bring him to that unit that has a female junior soldier. That's the closest you can get to something like that. Mm-hmm. But that is not taking a job away from anybody. That's just moving people around.
Exactly, which the Army will do because, needs of the Army.
Right.
As it turns out, go do this because we need you to do it. All right, so Steve, we got one more thing to talk about. The Army being deployed down to the border to crack down on immigration, which has been a thing that's been happening for years already. But what's the difference now?
So Trump surged about 1,600 troops to the border, about 1,000 soldiers, and about 500 to 600 Marines. The Marines are mostly coming from engineer units. They're doing a lot of fortification of various border wall infrastructure, putting up some razor wire, and the Army's mission is much more security. Most of those units are MPs. The mission is we don't really know. Traditionally, it's the Army has helped with things like reconnaissance, like they might help fly drones or do surveillance. They'll, which really massive, like they're looking at cameras or something, and they might radio into Border Patrol, like, hey, I see something here. They're not really doing the apprehensions or any sort of handling of the migrants. They're largely there as an extra deterrent, just extra eyes and ears and spaces. Nothing too crazy. And we've seen this politicized with Governor Abbott in Texas, where you really have to, it's kind of hard to see the difference between security and deterrence to window dressing for some sort of a political message or something like that. And we're probably going to see many more troops come to the border. We know part of the 82nd is on a sort of a standby for that mission, as well as part of the 10th Mountain. And we have to keep our eyes on with the 82nd in particular. So they have a group of soldiers that is the immediate response force. This is America's 911 call to go anywhere. China invades Taiwan. They're first in the chute. Afghanistan was another example of them being used. And they kind of rotate that. For the folks listening, you can't just snap your fingers and deploy an army in anywhere in the world. There's a lot of logistics. There's a lot of there's a lot of things that have to happen, a lot of packing, and it just doesn't happen right away. And these people have all that stuff checked already. So I'd be curious if the 82nd is used. That is a huge signal that this is the administration's highest national security priority. Because what that says is our 911 call is being used right now. So what happens if something else happens around the world?
Right. And to deploy the 82nd is to, as you said, say to everybody else, we don't have the 82nd anymore because they're too busy down here staring at computer screens, I guess.
Right.
Which I wouldn't be surprised. Like you said, Afghanistan was the time that was used. When's the last time the 82nd was called up for a fast move like that?
Yeah, probably the fall of Afghanistan. And part of it at
all. So they're not doing anything.
Yeah, and also for some hurricane relief pretty recently. And then the other thing to keep this is also one of those. What does Trump say versus versus what does he do? Pete Hegseth did just go on Fox News and said something to the effect of airstrikes in Mexico is on the table.
Jesus.
But it's Pete Hegseth. It's on Fox. Let's wait and see. Like it's the most difficult thing when it comes to covering this administration. Obviously, you report on what they say. You talk about the consequences of it. But part of it is we got to wait and see what they actually do. Like what is red meat thrown to the base versus what is an actual policy? What is the action we're actually going to take? Guantanamo Bay is another example where Trump just said he wants to put 30,000 migrants in Guantanamo Bay. It doesn't have the capacity to hold more than 1,000 people.
Yeah, at any point in time, it's never had more than that capacity.
Right.
And that is a huge logistical nightmare to say where, and also just incredibly stupid. Just moving people itself is a dangerous proposition in this kind of thing. And yeah, as you said, like he says a lot of stuff. A lot of times nothing ends up happening. And that is kind of part of the point of it is to keep everybody guessing, not sure what the next step is. That's part of the whole, like, I'm going to burn down the rest of this country with my insane ideas. This is part of it. So it is, as you said, the airstrikes in Mexico, you're really not going to know if airstrikes in Mexico are going to happen until airstrikes are happening in Mexico.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So on this border mission that we have down here too, 1,600 people. Do you know how many people were down there already? Because there seemed to be a rotation of like National Guard units that kept going in and out.
Right. Yeah. So there's been about before this influx, it's about 2,500, and that is a mix of Greg Abbott's state mission, and then there's also an ongoing federal mission that's just been going on for decades. There's always been some level of military presence at the border.
Are you ready for the real question here though? Because this is the question that's going to be on everybody's minds. Does a border deployment count for a combat patch?
I mean, if we start doing airstrikes in Mexico, probably.
I guess so. Because American war history has told us sometimes an airstrike can hit you too.
Yeah. I mean, for all we know, does this again? Do we send troops there? It's a great photo op. You could say you're bolstering border security, which is that's Trump's biggest thing. Or does this turn into Sicario?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see. And when it happens, Steve, we'll bring you back on to talk about it. Steve, where can people find you these days?
Oh, they can find me on military.com, where I usually got something going on every day there, and Twitter and Blue Sky. Just what? How do you say Blue Sky handles? Because it's like crazy stuff.
I don't know. It'll be down in the show notes.
You can Google my name. You'll find it.
I'll pull your Blue Sky and I'll put it down in the show notes.
I'm around. I'm here. Yeah. I'm on military.com. I'm on Blue Sky. Steve Beynon, not to be confused with Steve Beynon. I know it's an easy thing to mix up.
It's not. You've got a Y in yours, so that's you got to hit that Y real hard. Yeah, Steve, you have a lot of great articles, and you're always putting out new stuff. So you should be, if you are interested in military news and not necessarily what the military itself puts out, because military.com is not military.gov. You should check it out and read Steve's stuff.
Yeah.
Check out everything down below. And everybody, Steve, thank you for coming on and talking to me. Like I said, it's been a while since we had you on. I hope to have you back as one of my regulars to talk about the news.
Yeah, as always, it's been a pleasure, and I'll be back anytime.
All right, everybody, thank you so much, and we'll talk to you next week.